The sky was the color of wet cement the morning of my husband's funeral, heavy and low, as if even the heavens felt the weight of loss. I stood at the entrance of the cemetery, fingers trembling around the handle of the small black umbrella I brought not for rain, but for comfort. The cold air wrapped itself around me like a shroud as I walked toward the gravesite. Every step echoed in the silence, bouncing off rows of forgotten stones and memories of people who once meant everything to someone. What I hadn't expected, what cut deeper than grief itself, was the emptiness of the place. There were no cars pulling in behind me, no hurried footsteps of children running to catch up, no soft whispers asking where to sit, no warm hands slipping into mine to steady me. The only sound was the crunch of gravel under my shoes. It was just me, and the casket holding the man I loved for 52 years. The wind tugged at my coat as I stopped in front of the polished wood. My throat tightened, not from the chill, but from the knowledge that our children, our own flesh and blood, had chosen a night of parties, music and meaningless laughter over their father's final goodbye. I tried calling them that morning. I tried calling them the night before. I even left messages filled with trembling hope, praying at least one of them would remember the man who carried them on his shoulders, stayed awake all night with their fevers, and worked double shifts to send them to college. But every call ended the same way. Silence or excuses. "We're busy, Mom. It's just bad timing." Bad timing. Losing their father wasn't an inconvenience. But attending a rooftop party, drinking until dawn and posting smiling photos online, that somehow wasn't too much to ask. I pressed my trembling hand to the casket. Its surface was smooth and freezing under my palm, like the world had already moved on without him. I whispered, "I'm sorry, my love. You deserved more. You deserved them here." I remembered him as he was before the illness. Quiet, steady, with hands that always smelled of machine oil from the workshop he adored. He wasn't a perfect man, but he was a devoted father, the kind who believed love was shown through actions, not words. He never asked for gratitude, but he didn't deserve to be forgotten. The pastor spoke softly beside me, reading words meant to comfort, but I barely heard them. My mind drifted, past birthdays, school plays, late-night talks in our kitchen, to the years when our children were small and still believed we were their whole world. When they clung to our legs and begged for bedtime stories. When they cried into our shoulders after scraped knees or broken hearts. When did that change? When did love turn into distance? When did gratitude fade into entitlement? The final prayer ended, and the cemetery returned to silence. I stood alone as the casket was lowered into the earth. No goodbyes from our children. No final moments shared as a family. Just me, whispering a promise into the cold air. I was here. I will always be here. Even when they weren't. As I turned to leave, a strange feeling settled in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Just a quiet, piercing ache, and the first spark of something else. Something that would grow by morning. The morning after my husband's funeral, the house felt impossibly quiet. Quieter than grief, quieter than sorrow, quiet in a way that felt like the world was holding its breath. Sunlight pushed weakly through the curtains, catching dust in the air like suspended memories. I sat at the edge of our bed, still wearing the black dress from the day before, unable to bring myself to change. His side of the bed remained perfectly untouched. The blanket smoothed from the night I tucked him in for the last time. I hadn't slept. Grief doesn't allow that. It comes in waves, some small, some overwhelming, but always relentless. Still, the silence allowed something else to creep in, clarity. A painful, brittle clarity. My phone vibrated around 10 a.m. For a moment, my heart kicked with hope. Maybe, just maybe, one of them had realized what yesterday meant. Maybe they would show remorse, or even offer a simple "Mom, are you okay?" Something human. Something warm. Something a child would say to a mother who just buried her lifelong companion. But reality has a cruel way of showing itself. The call wasn't about regret. It wasn't about grief. It wasn't about love. It was about money. "Mom, did the funeral go fine? Did you handle everything?" My eldest asked, his voice sounding distracted, like he was talking while scrolling through something more interesting. Also, was there anything in Dad's paperwork we should know about? Any accounts? Property details? I sat frozen, staring at the wall. The world tilted in that moment. My daughter's call followed moments later. Not condolences, not comfort, but impatience. "I don't want to sound insensitive," she said in a tone that already was. "But do you know when we'll need to sign anything? I have a trip this weekend." A trip. They couldn't come to the funeral, but they could go on vacation. Each word they spoke sliced a little deeper, carving out pieces of the illusion I had spent years carrying, that deep down they still cared. That perhaps adulthood had simply busied them. That life had gotten in the way. That selfishness hadn't replaced love. But their voices made everything brutally clear. When the calls ended, I sat in silence, the phone heavy in my hand. The betrayal from the day before solidified into something sharper, something I could finally name without hesitation. I had raised children who loved what we gave them, not who we were. Slowly, I stood and walked through the house. Every corner was a memory. Every photo was a story. Every object whispered his presence. I touched the frame of our wedding photo, tracing the edges with trembling fingers. I remembered how he used to laugh in the kitchen while cooking breakfast, how he left notes in my apron pockets during anniversaries, how he still reached for my hand even when his memory started slipping. And then there were the photos of our children. First steps, graduations, weddings. Smiling faces, bright eyes. Faces that looked at him with love once upon a time. When did they forget him? I whispered to myself. When did they forget me? Something inside me hardened. Not a hatred, but a resolve forged from years of unnoticed sacrifice. I made my way to his study. The room still smelled faintly of pine wood and aftershave. Papers were neatly stacked on his desk, documents tied with the red ribbon he always used. I sat down, my spine straightening, my breath steadying. If our children cared only for what we had, then it was time to decide who truly deserved what we built. As I untied the first bundle of documents, I whispered to the quiet room, "To the man I loved and lost. They abandoned you. They won't abandon your legacy." And for the first time since he passed, I felt something warm rise in my chest. Not hope, not peace, but purpose. The lawyer's office sat at the end of a quiet street, tucked between an old bakery and a shop that repaired watches. I had passed it 100 times over the years, never imagining I would one day walk through its doors alone. Without my husband's steady hand at my back, without his warm voice telling me everything would be all right. But grief changes you. It sharpens the edges of your vision, clears the fog of old illusions, and forces you to see people, especially your own children, for who they truly are. The bell above the door chimed softly as I entered. "Mrs. Hale," the lawyer greeted gently, standing from his desk. "I'm very sorry for your loss. How are you holding up?" I could have cried right then just from hearing someone care. But I straightened my shoulders instead. I had cried enough. Now was the time to act. "I need to update my will," I said, my voice steady. "And I need to do it today." He hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Of course. Let's go through everything." As I sat down, he brought out papers, thick stacks of documents, old records, property files my husband had collected and organized over decades. My husband was always meticulous, always thinking ahead, always preparing to take care of me even after he was gone. "Your husband left something you should see," the lawyer said after a moment, reaching into a safe behind his desk. He pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed slightly with time. "He instructed me to give this to you only after his passing." My breath caught. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Inside was a letter, his handwriting unmistakable, slightly tilted, strong strokes that had never changed. As I read, tears blurred the ink. "My love, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. Please don't cry too long. Live. Do what makes you happy. And remember, everything I built was always for you. Not for them, unless they showed they deserved it. You'll know what to do." He knew. He always knew. Behind the letter was a small key and a note. "For the account only you should control." The lawyer explained it was a private savings account my husband had kept secret. Money meant solely for my future, untouched by anyone else. It was large. Much larger than I expected. A quiet strength surged through me. I set the letter down and looked directly at the lawyer. "I want to leave nothing to my children. Not a cent. Not a property. Not a single piece of what we earned. His eyebrows rose slightly. Are you sure? I nodded. They didn't come to their father's funeral. They didn't call to ask how I'm doing. They only want what they think they're entitled to. And I won't let them dishonor him like that. Instead, I outlined what I wanted. Scholarships for hardworking students with no family support. A fund for elderly widows abandoned by their children. Donations to the children's hospital my husband adored. And a trust in my name to secure my own final years. Ensuring I would never depend on those who abandoned me. As the lawyer took notes, I felt something shift inside me. A slow reclaiming of the power I had given away for decades without even realizing it. When everything was set in writing, he looked up. Your children will be shocked. I allowed myself a small, quiet smile. Good. Some lessons must be learned the hard way. Walking out of the office, I felt the winter wind bite at my cheeks. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel cold. I felt alive. Purposeful. Ready. My children thought they held greed in their hands. But the truth was simple. I held justice in mine. 2 weeks later, I received the call I had been expecting. Mom, we need to talk. All of us, my daughter said, her tone clipped, impatient, as if I were the inconvenience in her busy schedule. I agreed, choosing a quiet, neutral place. My lawyer's office. Not my home, not a restaurant, not anywhere filled with emotions or distractions. This was business, the legacy of the man they abandoned. When I arrived, they were already there. My 3 children sat lined up like restless students summoned to the principal's office. Their expressions ranged from strained politeness to thinly veiled irritation. No grief. No remorse. Just expectation. What took you so long, Mom? My eldest son asked, checking his watch. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The lawyer entered the room, closing the door with a quiet finality. Thank you all for coming. As you know, we're here to go over Mr. Hale's estate and Mrs. Hale's current arrangements. Immediately, their postures shifted, shoulders straightening, eyes sharpening, breaths holding. Like predators catching the scent of prey. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. The lawyer began reading the documents. Their father's assets, our home, the savings accounts, the land he purchased long ago. Each item made my children lean forward slightly, anticipation glowing on their faces. Then came the moment. And after reviewing the updated will, the lawyer continued. It is my professional duty to inform you that your mother has designated her entire estate to various charitable programs, including... What? My middle son interrupted, his voice cracking. What do you mean, charities? Where is our portion? The lawyer cleared his throat politely. There is no portion. Your mother has assigned full distribution to community programs, educational scholarships, retirement care foundations, and widow support efforts. Upon her passing, all assets will go directly to those beneficiaries. My daughter stared at me, disbelief widening her eyes. Mom, is this some kind of mistake? I looked at each of them, really looked. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to see them clearly. Not the children I raised, but the adults they had chosen to become. No, I said softly. It isn't a mistake. Their outrage erupted like a fire. After everything we did. We're your children. You can't just. This is our inheritance. I raised a hand, and surprisingly they fell silent. You didn't come to your father's funeral. I began, my voice steady, calm, almost gentle. You didn't stand beside me when I buried the man who gave you everything. You didn't grieve. You didn't show love. But the next morning, you called about money. My eldest scoffed. We were busy. No, I said firmly. You weren't busy. You were indifferent. A heavy silence filled the room. Uncomfortable. Undeniable. I continued. Your father taught you about respect. About loyalty. About family. And you failed him in his final hour. I will not reward neglect with wealth. My daughter's eyes glistened with sudden tears. Not of sorrow, but of frustration. So you're punishing us? I'm choosing to honor your father, I replied. I'm choosing to help people who will appreciate what we built. And I'm choosing to live the rest of my life with peace, not disappointment. Their faces hardened, but their arguments faded. Deep down, they knew the truth. They had abandoned him, and expected to be rewarded for it. When the meeting ended, they stormed out without looking back. But I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. Later that afternoon, I visited my husband's grave. I brushed fallen leaves from the stone, placed fresh flowers, and sat beside him in the soft wind. "It's done," I whispered. "Everything we built will go to people who still know how to love." And in the quiet of that cemetery, I felt something warm, almost like a hand resting gently on mine. Not grief, not revenge, just peace.